Ahoy hoy, I'm Planetwalk, and as you can clearly see, the Beard saga continues. But speaking of things that are continuing, there is something that is decided to continue that really should have ended before it came out. I am of course talking about the Level series. Now, if you don't know what the Level series is, it is a series of films about the Earth being flat. They call themselves documentaries, but as we all know, they're actually comedies. Now, to get everybody up to speed, the first film was essentially a fancy Eric Dubé video. The second film, that was them just speculating about things like what might be beyond the ice wall. It really had no arguments as far as I saw. And the third film, well, I haven't seen that yet because it only just came out. Now this time I'm going to try and make more of an effort to actually get through the entire film, rather than just making one video and then never touching the thing again. Although I suppose if any of the videos in this series thing that I'm going to do, because I'm not going to be watching the whole video in this one, gets, let's say, I don't know, 100,000 views, that seems like a reasonable amount, right? Then I might consider going back and revisiting the old levels. Anyway, grab some popcorn, get comfortable, and let's jump into the movie.
Okay, level with me here. There's this idea that we live on a ball and it's spinning and traveling through space at unfathomable speeds, yet you can't measure it, you can't repeat it or observe it.
So right off the bat, they decide that they want to be, wrong. But I suppose that's not surprising given the fact that they're flat earthers. The rotation of Earth does cause effects that we can measure, such as Coriolis, things weighing less at the equator. In fact, the late Bob Nodal even measured the rotation of the Earth. Thanks, Bob. But flat earthers tend to ignore that because it's very inconvenient for them. I doubt we'll see anything like that addressed in this video.
There are no satellites in the vacuum of space. Satellites are satelloons.
Please do let me know when you figure out how a balloon can go as fast as the ISS goes without even having any visible balloon.
You're aliens. Let's say you're an outer space alien fanatic. What if I told you you can have your aliens too? That they come from outer space, not upper space, but outer space.
Oh yeah, the last movie waffled on about aliens outside of the ice wall, didn't it? Makes me wonder if we're going to get any ancient aliens kind of stuff in this movie as well.
So what is it? What's stopping you? You've never seen curvature with your own eyes. You never felt the Earth spinning. You've never been able to observe and measure these claims. So at this point it becomes a religion.
Well, here's the thing. I don't subscribe to the idea that you have to go out and test every single claim that you hear people make. Now, it's fine to have skepticism if you hear someone making an outlandish claim. That is fine. I have skepticism of outlandish claims too. The problem comes when you try to say that something is an outlandish claim when there is tons of evidence for it. Sure, you can try and say that some of the evidence is fake, but when you consider how many people would have to be in on the conspiracy for that evidence to be fake, it then makes it seem very unlikely that it will be fake. And the funny thing is that there's no evidence that there's a big conspiracy to fake all the evidence that is in support of the globe. Flat earthers have to believe that because otherwise the Earth just can't be flat.
Being on a ball from an accident of a Big Bang, evolved from monkeys, that's no way to live. That's no way to perceive life. You're an accident. You have no purpose.
Okay, it may be true that I was an accident, but people generally don't complain about my presence, so we can say that I was a happy accident. But here's the thing, I don't feel like I need a purpose that's been placed on me by some supernatural entity in order to enjoy life. I make my own purpose, which honestly to me is far more fulfilling because I'm doing what I want to do. But even if I did need some kind of supernatural justification for whatever my purpose is, I wouldn't need to believe the Earth is flat to get that. Because you can believe that a god or gods exist without believing that the Earth is flat. They can exist if the Earth is a globe. I mean, do you really think that Odin wouldn't be able to make the Earth a globe? Sure he can, he's Odin.
Look out here, there's no curvature. 120,000 feet, 30,000 feet, it's nowhere to be seen. Where's the curve?
Well, it turns out that when you do put a camera that doesn't have any fisheye lens at 120,000 feet, that there is curve there. But again, flat earthers just dismiss that because it's inconvenient to their belief that the Earth is flat.
On January 28, 1986, CNN watched the Challenger launch live on the air with its viewers. They and the other media outlets told you that the astronauts died in the explosion.
Oh, fuck off with that. I hate this thing of, oh, they say that they died, but they didn't actually die. It's really disrespectful to pretend like someone didn't actually die when they did. It is one thing to say that the Earth is flat or deny the moon landings and stuff like that. But you cross a line when you try to say that people that actually died in a tragic accident didn't actually die. Now, it would be a bit more understandable if this was something that nobody was talking about or something, but here's the thing. This conspiracy theory has been debunked several times, and yet they still push it. Well, it looks like I'm gonna finally have to debunk this, so what have we got?
But 6 out of 7 have identical names. They work for universities, most of them.
There were no people in the Challenger. That was a hoax. That's been proven conclusively by researchers and reporters, investigators, who have found that those supposed people that were in the Challenger are still alive today.
Okay, let's go through each of these people, starting with Judith Resnick. Now, this should come as no surprise that the Judith Resnick that is still alive today was actually doing things at the time of the Challenger disaster. During the disaster, she was working as a professor of law at the University of Southern California. In fact, it appears that she has only ever worked in law, whereas the Judith Resnick that was in the Challenger disaster, she was a pilot. She also had a PhD in electrical engineering. These are two very different people that just happen to share a name. Heaps of people share names with other people. Next we have Sharon McAuliffe. Now, the Sharon McAuliffe that is alive today, at the time of the Challenger disaster, she was working for an accounting firm in New York. The other Sharon McAuliffe, before the disaster, was a teacher. Methinks that is a very different profession. In addition, these two people look very different to each other. They are not the same person. Next we have Carl McNair. Now, there was no Carl McNair that died in the Challenger disaster. There was a Ronald McNair, but not a Carl McNair. As it turns out, Carl McNair is Ronald McNair's brother. You know, that's a different person. Very different person. Sure, they're related, but they're not the same person. And the same thing goes for Claude Onizuka, who is the brother of Alison Onizuka, who died in the Challenger disaster. Next, we have Richard Scobie, who, at the time of the Challenger disaster, was CEO of Marketing Edge Incorporated. The person who died, on the other hand, was a pilot, not a CEO. And lastly, we have Michael J. Smith. And I will admit, there is an uncanny resemblance here. I also couldn't find a whole lot of information on the Michael J. Smith that is alive today. So initially, this seems like a slam dunk. But you want to know the little bit of information that completely changes everything here. Consider the name Michael. Very common name. I have multiple friends called Michael. Now consider the name Smith. Another very common name. You want to know how many Michael Smiths there are in the United States of America? Over 20,000 alive today. This means that, in all likelihood, there is going to be a Michael J. Smith out there that looks similar to the Michael J. Smith that died in the Challenger disaster, because it's such a common name. Being surprised at that is like being surprised that there is another person on Earth who shares the same birthday as you. Yeah, it's basically a given that that's going to be the case. But here's something that none of these flat earthers seem to consider. If you're going to fake someone's death and then let them just live their life afterwards, wouldn't you want them to change their name in a significant way, like change their first name and change their last name? You can do that, you know. Legally, I can change my name, and I'm not even employed by NASA. Although flat earthers would probably disagree. So it shouldn't be too hard to do that.
So imagine you're at the launch of the Challenger. This is a historic moment and it blows up in midair. Whether you are personally related to somebody on there or don't know anybody, you're going to be a mess. This is an emotional, incredible scene. And CNN was reporting, and they told the cameraman, let's get a live shot of Krista's parents. And when they zoomed in on them, they were giggling, they were laughing, they were smiling. I don't know how you can put a smile on someone's face, even if you told them the funniest joke in the world at that very moment.
Okay, here's the thing. When it comes to shocking events that happen, you're never quite sure how to deal with it, especially in the moment. It's usually later that the full impact of what has happened hits you. I know that from experience. You may also be aware of the 5 stages of grief. Stage number 1 is denial. Jokes are a good way to deny something. You'd think flat earthers of all people would be able to recognise that, seeing as they've been stuck on the first stage of grief ever since they've been presented with evidence that the earth is a globe. On top of that, the lady in the clip, she did look distressed, at least to me. Didn't really look like she was laughing to me.
Let's start with former NASA astronaut Michael J. Smith, with the same name as this retired professor from the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Are you Michael Smith? Yeah. Professor at university? Retired. Retired? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I just stopped by because there's this room. Are you aware of that? There's a rumor on the internet.
It's not me.
That people are saying.
Yeah, it's not me, obviously. I mean, anybody that looks at my background, looks where I was born, it's not me. I mean, it's interesting that the Michael J. Smith, that was the astronaut, looks something like me when we were younger, but really not if you really look at facial recognition.
You never been a pilot, never been in the military?
Nothing like that.
Huh.
You know, going to someone's house to ask them about that kind of thing, I would say is going the extra mile. There is, you know, speculating about something on the internet, but then there is actually going to someone's house to ask them about your deranged conspiracy theory. Personally, I am surprised that he was able to remain that calm. If I were in that position, I'd be heading inside immediately and calling the police.
When she's approached, she has a very odd way of not responding.
Hey, Judy? How you doing? I'm from the press. I just had a quick question, if you don't mind.
What press?
I'm from a radio station in San Bernardino. I know there's a conspiracy about a space shuttle. No, I want to be polite. Friendly, just a question. So there's a lot of rumors about you being on that space shuttle. Obviously, you know, if you want to comment, we would really appreciate it.
Kind of odd that Judith is in full panic mode when realising the press is in her presence.
The press? I'm sorry, that is not the press. That is a random person. They're acting really surprised that when someone just comes up to her and follows her around asking her questions, that she would want to get away from that person. Again, I'd do the same. If someone's doing something like that, you don't know their intentions. Sure, they might just want to have a friendly chat, but they also might be a bit angry at you for something that they've made up.
Commander Dick Scobie had a company called Cows and Trees, and when you went to his website, there was an animation of a cow taking off like a rocket with a smoke stream coming out of its backside, doing a twisty curl in the air that looked remarkably just like what we saw with the Challenger. And after we started making videos on that and it started going viral, that website disappeared, never to be seen again.
So I did a bit of digging into this, and as it turns out, there are a couple of websites that used to be associated with Cows and Trees. One of them being cows.noble.net. Now, that website doesn't exist anymore, but we can view it with the Wayback Machine, and when we do that, we find a Nautilus shell on there. That spiral is very clearly a reference to a Nautilus shell, not to the Challenger disaster. Now, the next question is, well, why was the website taken down? And the answer is probably just rebranding, to be honest. As far as I can tell, Cows and Trees became a part of Noble Communications, which has since rebranded to Wisdom. And that's probably why the website isn't available anymore. If a website doesn't really serve any purpose for your company, then you're not going to be keeping it around. So yeah, it's definitely not as conspiratorial as the flat earthers make it out to be.
Ellison Onizuka, if you look at clips of him back in 1986 when this happened, he actually spoke like, every other word was,
Let me say that it's really a pleasure to be back.
If you look at clips of his brother, Claude, now speaking, it's the same exact thing. Every other word is,
Okay, so let me get this straight. These are two people that are brothers, and would have thus had a similar upbringing, And you're surprised that they sound very similar?
Why aren't there any pictures of his brother back when this happened? Why didn't his brother speak at the funeral? Use your head.
Former Governor Ariyoshi, who has a story about a picture that survived the Challenger disaster.
And she said, there are two things in there. One was a monk's prayer.
Okay, so this is something that could definitely use a few labels, because he says, oh, there's no photos of Claude. But then he shows a photo, which is a family photo, and asks, where is Claude in this photo? But here's the thing, who are any of those people in that photo? I assume one of them is Allison. Maybe one of them is Claude. I don't know what Claude looked like back when that photo was taken. They didn't establish who any of those people are so that we could rule out Claude being in that photo, so it's very well possible that he is.
Ronald McNair conveniently has a twin brother named Carl McNair, who looks exactly like him and is at a lot of the events now, but was nowhere to be found when the explosion happened.
They're not twins. I don't know where you got that idea from, but you're wrong on that. Also, there's a few differences between how Carl and Ronald look. Most notably, Carl has a gap between his top front teeth. As for Carl being nowhere to be found before the Challenger disaster, this is in a time before the internet. At that time, unless you're someone who's notable, people weren't really going to be keeping tabs on you and documenting your life.
Well, where's Jarvis? How come you haven't located him? And the answer is, he could have died of natural causes, a heart attack, a car accident, 3, 4, 5 years later, and it would never be reported.
Given the tenuous links between the other people, I think that it's just likely that you haven't found someone that is similar enough. But here's the funny thing. Now, for a second, we're just going to assume that they're right and this conspiracy theory is true. It is very telling that you don't think for a second that one of the explanations for why you haven't found this person is because they changed their name. That never occurred to you.
The reason they did it was a psychological operation to justify not doing manned space flights anymore and to pull on your heartstrings with an emotional cover, so if you dare question it, then you're immoral.
Well, that doesn't make sense because they are trying to introduce viable space travel. Even if your conspiracy theory is true, it doesn't really make sense because if it were true, you'd think they'd be using it to say, hey, we can't be working on space travel because of this disaster.
Some astronauts blow up in a rocket. What does that do subconsciously to the average person? They don't want to go up into space. They don't want to blow up in a rocket. We'll leave that to the professionals. We'll leave that to NASA and our government.
Wait, do you really think that if the Challenger disaster hadn't happened, that the average person would be able to go up into space now, and that it wouldn't cost millions of dollars? There's also the fact that to go into space, no matter what, you're going to need training. They don't just put people up there.
The government had incentivized the different public schools to play the Challenger in their classrooms, so they rolled their TV sets out, they had all the children sit down and get ready to watch it, and 20% of the American public watched the Challenger event happen live, and within 1 hour, 80% of Americans had seen the Challenger tragedy happen.
Well, it's not surprising that a lot of people would be watching stuff like that because that kind of stuff can be a very historical moment. It just so happened that with this one, something went wrong. That doesn't have to mean that it was planned or anything, because this may be a shock to some flat earthers, but things do go wrong sometimes. Now, from what it seems, we've made it past the Challenger disaster section of the movie, which is an entire third of the movie. This feels worse than the last one, because they said a lot of nothing, hence why this video is a lot shorter than I thought it was going to be. Anyway, we will return to this, and hopefully it gets better, but, I doubt it will. But anyway, leave a like and subscribe if you like this video. Leave a comment letting me know what you think. If you want to see me suffer through the rest of the first two movies, sharing it around will help. As always, a big shout out to my $20 or more patrons. Hugh Jarsz, M.C.Nutkin, Nathaniel Muller, Vermont1777, Wolfie, Morrie, Graymore Ghost, KidVicious, Sacha Campbell, definitely not NASA, Craig D'Amelio, and Richard M Chapman. If you want to support me financially, you can do so on Patreon. There should be a link over that way. But anyway, I will see you in the next video. Between you and me, thank you for watching.